Last night, we saw Caitlin Clark take the last shot of her season.
A couple of weeks ago that were telling me it's worse now.
The absence of Caitlin Clark and the WNBA is in anguish, as if they just lost the lottery ticket that won the prize.
Feel like I'm getting hammered and everybody is physical with me, and opponents get away with things that other people don't get away with. That's what Caitlin Clark said.
Stephen A. Smith had no desire to. Don't talk, let's be honest. Does he ever? Called out the league in a bombshell. Their massive error, and allowing their most brilliant star walk Clark, who delivered enthusiasm, shattering the viewership record, as well as an unparalleled highlight clip too. She is now playing women's basketball. How did the WNBA screw with European talents? This ups the tough play and constant fouls, and absence of defense for their largest. At last, the asset drove Clark over the edge. Rather than supporting her, the league sat. Return, and they are currently in possession of the fragments of their broken future. This is not merely an error. Rather, it's the type of blooper reels reenact the mishap. For many years to come, not just any player, Caitlin Clark was. Did arenas sell the player she packed? Jerseys more quickly than you could click. Fans were riveted to their cart after adding it. Displays as if it were the final installment of their favorite program, and she's going to. The WNBA in Europe is left to face its future. Lacking their MVP, and believe me, it's not looking excellent. But before we discuss everything this catastrophic failure's delicious details make sure you like and subscribe to this video channel and press that bell for alerts that you should remain in the loop, since, let's be honest, the WNBA is set to experience a wild ride. Stephen A. And it's not the enjoyable type. Smith was unreserved in his criticism of the WNBA for their enormous error.
Struggled with physical defense she's faced at the professional level and voiced frustration with the league's officiating, recently telling reporters, quote, "I feel like I'm getting hammered and everybody is physical with me, and opponents get away with things that other people don't get away with." That's what Caitlin Clark.
He made note of what the league has been thinking. Didn't go far enough in keeping Caitlin safe. Clark consistently plays dirty on the court. It seemed as though she was playing fouls. Instead of basketball, play dodgeball. The WNBA, meanwhile, merely stood there, with a clipboard in hand. What can we do? Well, perhaps keep your greatest player, Clark, safe. Wasn't merely a face in the crowd. People were watching because of her. First of all, the WNBA is currently stuck. I'm curious how they overlooked this one. Caitlin Clark's weakest feature was women's basketball was ignited by this spark. Her incredible abilities and game-winning performances attracted new admirers and received. Talking about losing her isn't merely when you lose a player, you lose the vitality of the league.
Towards things involving Caitlin Clark. When we pointed that out, we said why? What was the necessity for it? Because a rising tide lifts all boats. This woman is box office. Plus, she can play. And the combination of the two would ultimately give all of those wonderful ladies for the wonderful work.
How do you do it? Stephen A. Smith was spot on. Allow your biggest star to leave, rather than ensuring her protection. And pleased that the WNBA allowed her to be driven over. And she's currently collecting her belongings for Europe, where she will be respected. This loss is comparable to what the WNBA deserves. It hurts to be immersed in slow motion. Furthermore, Caitlin Clark was the player who attracted large crowds, was given a boost. The league's image and became informal. Viewers become diehard devotees in her absence. The WNBA is frantically trying to determine their next course of action, and let's face it, it's not every successful endeavor will be simple. A celebrity is needed in a sports league to carry the. Caitlin was the star of the flag, and now the league must attempt to bridge a gap that might be too large to accommodate Caitlin Clark's. The decision to quit the WNBA has caused a stir. The world of basketball, and to be honest, it's difficult to assign blame because there are multiple athletes choosing to go after opportunity. It's about a basic issue abroad. Dissection in the WNBA regarding how they lost possession of the ball while they had one of women's sports' biggest stars. Under their control, Clark's departure has turned into a warning not only for the league, but for media and sports fans. ESPN and other partners who were slow to recognize her enormous influence on Clark's. The choice to leave the WNBA has blasted shockwaves through the basketball community, and it serves as a sign of the underlying problems that the league has to, if it wants to keep its top spot, talent, and keep developing. Let's take a break. Caitlin Clark's reasons for quitting the WNBA is so significant and why it indicates that there are some significant problems with the league. To start by addressing Caitlin, Clark was more than a mere participant in the. She was the player who drew, in the WNBA, thousands of admirers for the person whose. Everyone was talking about the name, from basketball fans to casual spectators. We're discussing a 400% rise in audience, a startling figure that should have had ESPN and the WNBA rushing to make her the focal point in all that they accomplished, but rather than treating her as the celebrity that she obviously did, they expose her to severe, violent play, persistent disrespect, and inadequate institutional backing. It is unclear why she chose to pack her things and travel to Europe so she can perform in a league that genuinely respects her contributions both off the court and on it. At Clark, at the peak of her career in the WNBA, was drawing audiences comparable to those of the NBA. The average number of people that played her games was 177,000 people watched the WNBA. Had not seen anything like this in years. A focus was precisely what the league needed, required to expand. However, rather than using to their benefit, they appear to disregard. ESPN is the primary media partner of the NBA. Didn't provide her with the protection she either merited. Clark's ascent to fame or ought to have been a significant story that controlled sports media, but it was frequently. ESPN didn't treat it like an afterthought. Genuinely appreciate her worth until it was too late, and Clark had already looking at other opportunities that the media has postponed. Reaction to her achievement revealed a larger problem with women's sports. Now, everyone is treated fairly. Clark had to contend with more than simply a deficiency of media coverage. The more significant problem was what she endured during the game on the court. Following the game, she encountered extremely violent offenses that ought to been criticized and disciplined instantly, but rather than implementing the referees appeared to ignore the rules. Watch the game's physicality closely. Into perilous territory, much like Clark was frequently the object of harsh, needless interaction that occurred and went unpunished. So awful that Clark was frequently abandoned to defend herself without any defense from. This wasn't just about the officials. Nasty basketball, it was blatant disregard for a player who was putting in a lot of effort. The least the league could do for the game duty was to make sure she was safe, but they failed to. And that's a major factor in her decision to abandoning Clark's experience increases grave worries regarding the WNBA's. Gives special attention to its top players regarding their health and welfare on the Clark and other court players who put their every game deserves more when the body is on the line. More than merely praising their abilities, they should be shielded from the league's failure to make sure the guidelines were adhered to, and that the things she was being exposed to, unnecessary bodily damage, is obviously oversight. This wasn't an isolated incident. Problem, it was a systematic issue that casts doubt on the league's capacity to uphold and protect its most precious resources. But it wasn't only the physical infractions Clark was handling. She was also exposed to rubbish conversation and other disrespectful actions from her opponents. Are now aware that a small amount of competitive banter is included in athletics, but the degree of animosity Clark faced seems to go well beyond that. To exist in a league culture that permitted other players to target her unjustly, with little to no repercussions. The WNBA, which ought to have intervened to instead defend one of its most prominent stars, watched, and allowed this terrible situation to occur. Surroundings just become worse than Clark's. With some players, success even increased, making an effort to include race in the dialogue, diminishing her ability and hard work to pointless debates regarding privilege, the matter of women's rights and race. Sports are a topic of constant discussion. Things must never be disregarded. Sadly, Clark ended up at the heart of it, not due to anything she did, but due to the way some players and the way the media framed her success. Instead of honoring her achievements, they made an effort to minimize them, suggesting that her ascent was because of circumstances outside of her control instead, compared to her indisputable talent and labor. Only these sorts of implication are ethical, function to split and weaken the advancements achieved in women's sports, and they exert needless pressure on Clark and other athletes who ought to be praised for their accomplishments instead of then examined for items outside of their control, but don't overlook the larger. Here, Clark wasn't merely taking hits that she was dealing with on the court. With the league's lack of backing, she had a monumental impact on the WNBA. However, the league appeared to be unsure of how to deal with it rather than constructing they allowed her to struggle in the future through challenging games without providing her with the support she required.
Stephen A., I would be remiss if I didn't say this. A lot of this noise came by people that were sitting on this network. They tried to minimize her, said, well, you giving her all this credit. What about the women that came before her? That Caitlin Clark, what she's doing doesn't minimize what they've done, but we should have been giving her the credit. We saw the ratings. We saw the merchandise sales. We saw the attendance. Caitlin Clark is box office. She's doing this. And instead of giving her credit,
in the event that a player is attracting those types of figures for both